Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight. This is episode 27. I'm Carly Kade, and today I am talking with PD Dave Basconi. Dave grew up in rural coal mining West Virginia with his two brothers. All worked in their parents' hardware store. He discovered his passion for horses at an early age when making deliveries with his father to local farms. Upon graduation with an engineering degree, he headed off to Connecticut, was soon married, and raised two sons. The dream to bring horses into his life came to life when he and his wife moved to a new location. That decision brought a host of new adventures, along with all of its challenges and rewards. A good decision with lots of work and no regrets. The chance to write about it came from the fortunate encounter with some very interesting and accomplished people in the world of books and media. Dave still lives in Connecticut with his wife, 3 cats, and 4 horses. Now, let's get into the interview. Welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast, a podcast featuring interviews with equestrian authors who love all things horses and writing about them. In each episode, you'll hear inspirational stories from horsebook authors, including writing advice and marketing tips to help you write your very own horsebook. If you're an author, aspire to be an author, or simply love horsebooks, then you are in the right place. I'm your host, Carly Kade, and creative writing makes my spurs jingle. Hi everyone, welcome to the Equestrian Author Spotlight. Today I am so excited to have fellow horsebook author PD Basconi on the show with me. I'm going to refer to him as Dave, but that is his pen name. So welcome to the show, Dave. I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Carly. I'm happy to be here.
Great. And what's so cool about this interview and what I found so neat is you actually reached out to me, Dave, because you saw an article in Horse Illustrated that featured the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. And you were like, hey, I write horse books. I'd love to talk with you. And I was like, yeah, come on the show. So, have you always been a lover of Horse Illustrated? Do you have a magazine subscription?
Yes, I've had one for years. And it's been great for me because I've learned a lot from it. The articles are great. And so, yes, it's just been wonderful for me as well.
I agree. I have loved Horse Illustrated magazine ever since I was a little cowgirl, and I have subscriptions. And then when they featured the podcast, it was just magical because I grew up with the publication, and it brought us together, and it's uniting me with other authors, which really makes me happy. So, Dave, what I love is kicking these interviews off with a conversation about how people got into horses and how their love affair with horses started. And I know from reading your book, Nonsense to HorseSense, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, that you have always wanted a horse, but you started your love affair with horses at a later time in life. So talk to us a little bit about how your journey with horses began.
Well, it began in my childhood, from my earliest memories. And again, I was one of those kids that sat in front of the TV to watch Roy Rogers because of the horses. And then as I got a little older, my cousin had a horse, a pony, so I was able to spend a little time there. What really got me thinking about it was my parents opened a hardware store, and we would make deliveries to farms. And just everything about going to a farm was exciting, especially if they had horses. And then I went to camp one summer. They had horseback riding. That was the best activity for me. Matter of fact, I'd be riding horses while everyone else was doing something else, So it goes back to my early days, early memories, but nothing happened until much later in life. So.
And then what made you pull the trigger? What made you just decide, I am going to be a horse owner? I've wanted one this whole time, and I'm just going to do it. What made you make that choice?
Well, it was things happen for a reason. When I left West Virginia, where I grew up, and came to Connecticut, I pretty much given up on the idea. No one in my family ever had horses, and I just thought it was just something someone else did, But my son got engaged to a woman who was a horse person. Oh yes, Horse Magazine was a trade magazine for horse owners. And I said, can I see that? And so I'm flipping through it, and it actually had horse properties in it. And my wife and I were getting ready to move. And just this thought hit me. He says, maybe now's the time to get a horse. And so that was the seed. So I started. My wife is thinking, well, okay, here's another crazy adventure, but she went along with it, and that's how it started. But I think getting horses later in life, I kind of made up for the delay with volume. I didn't get a horse. I ended up with 4 horses. So yeah.
Which you go into detail about in your book. So, and you still have, I mean, it's such a cool adventure. So tell us a little bit about your herd. And I love that you just decided to go for it. Something that you'd always dreamed of. And then you saw that magazine, and some of my favorite things to do is to look through those horse properties. And then you just jumped on it. So, so here you are, your wife says yes, you get this horse property. Tell us about your herd. I'm sure listeners would like to know.
Well, I don't want to give too much away in the book. We want to leave something for the readers. But
of course.
My first horse was a pregnant mare by design, and we were going to move into a corner of the state that was going to end up being too far away from my son and daughter-in-law, and we wanted to be close for the grandkids and all. So we're thinking, all right, let's move a little, let's change our minds here. But up in that part of the state, there was a woman who had horses, and we'd walk by her farm, and I never thought about, stopping in or anything. But once we made the decision to get a horse, that's when things started to happen. I pulled in one day, and one thing led to another, and she was very cautious. She asked me a bunch of questions, and then we kind of became friends, and she agreed to sell me a horse, which I was very comfortable with that, because you got to be careful in the horse market. I think in most cases, people want the horse to go to a good home, and they try to make sure it's a good match. But, on occasion, it doesn't turn out so well. So anyhow, I ended up with my first horse as a pregnant mare, and then we had to add. She couldn't be alone. Horses are herd animals, so we needed another one for her. And then so that brought it up to 3 after the Durham was born. And then the lady that was also a mutual friend with this lady, she wanted to get rid of a couple of horses. She had to reduce the herd size. So I was one of the 2 people that she would sell it to, because she wanted to make sure it went to a good home. And it happened to be the sister and daughter of one of the horses I had. So it's amazing how the horses ended up together at one place. Usually, when they're born, they just scatter. And I ended up with the mother and the son and the daughter. So that's unique, I think.
That is really unique. And, without giving too much away, why? I mean, I think a lot of horse people listening to this podcast would be like, oh, wow, a first horse, you chose a mare who was in foal. What compelled you to want to do that for your first horse?
Well, it was actually suggested by the lady that sold me the horse. Her name is Mary. She just said, well, why don't we try this and see what happens before Emmy goes to your place. I can try to breed her here at mine. Okay. And
so like a 2-for-1 deal.
Oh, it was. Yeah. Buy one, get one.
Yeah. Now, would you recommend that to a first-time horse owner, having gone through that experience?
Well, not necessarily. Not for if you've had horses or have horses, then that's fine. Obviously,
right.
You know what to do. But no, I tend to take a leap of faith on a lot of things, and so it's not for the timid. So would I recommend it? No. Can it be done? Yes.
Yeah, I like that answer. That's really great. I mean, the thing is, though, too, if you do buy a mare in foal, you're not going to be able to get a lot of riding done right out of the gate. So that's something to be cautious of. So, but I find it interesting that you kind of followed your muse or your inspiration as you were, taking your journey with these horses. So, And you include a lot of really cool pictures of your herd in your book as you're kind of discussing your really interesting topics, which kind of leads us into talking about your book, Nonsense to Horse Sense: How Horses Tell Us the Truth About Ourselves and How We Live. So I really, I think that the best way to approach this is kind of have you uh, summarize the book for listeners, and kind of talk to us about what compelled you to write this book.
Well, the book, what inspired me to write the book was learning from my horses
Hmm.
and realizing, I think at one point, there's a lot of nonsense going on. I think it's gotten worse as time is going on. But I'd go down to the barn, angry or upset or frustrated, or about what's going on, either with the job or just in general. And I noticed it didn't take long for all that tension just to drain from my body. I'd get engaged with the horses and the chores and all of that, and all of a sudden it was just easier to think through things.
Hmm.
It was an amazing place, and it was quiet. I don't play music, or I enjoy quiet, and so the barn became my sanctuary. And when you're in a position or in a place where you can actually observe and start to think through things, you start to make the connections. And I'm going, okay, why are we having some all these issues? And horses seem to have worked this out a long time ago. And so it kind of started with that. And plus, I was reading horse magazines at the time because
Hmm.
I was still a fairly new horse owner, and I love to learn. So by reading magazines and books and articles and things like that, I was starting to understand how they think and how they operate. And so over time, it just became obvious that maybe we should be taking a lesson from them, because they've been here for millions of years, and they are a prey animal.
Hmm.
I think being a prey animal was huge in helping me to come to some of the, draw some conclusions about all of this. And so once I had that in place, the whole idea was to put together a book that was easy to read. And I wrote it for teenage and up, because when I actually got to the point where the book was maybe going to happen, I was talking to someone, a friend. I actually thought she would write the book because she had just retired as a professor of philosophy. She'd written like 60 books.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, okay, I got the story, I got the facts. I'm not a writer. She is. And so when I approached her on it, she goes, "Yeah, I'm tired of writing. You write it. I'll help." And okay, so that's what we did. And she did say something that I I think I passed along to you. She said, "Not everyone, uh, no one writes a book that everyone likes or agrees with." And she
Hmm.
goes, "If you believe it, just put it out there."
Hmm.
And I'm going, you know what? That makes a lot of sense. If you're waiting for perfection, that's never going to happen. And so we kind of went back and forth a little bit, and she did help with the early chapters. And then once I kind of got the flow, and, learned what I needed to do, then I kind of finished it from there. But and it was meant to be an easy read book, but for teenage and up. And I say it that way because the teenager can read it, the parents can read it, and the grandparents, and they could all take something from it,
Hmm.
just based on their maturity level,
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I
I,
was going to say I totally got that from your book. It is very easy to read, and it's very insightful, and it's also funny. It's like I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was I enjoyed it because it was a quick read, and there were so many
yeah,
really great points that you make about you know the human community versus the horse herd, and if we could have adopt some of these things that horses do into how we communicate with other humans, we would be like a happier species, right? And like I really got that from reading your book. So I really wanted to ask you because you were, a lot of people will have like an idea for a book and then want to go to other people to have that person write the book. But I'm really excited that you didn't go that route and that she had you write your own book. Like, what did you discover for yourself having written it yourself? Like, I mean, I'm sure there's the accomplishment of having written a book when when you were thinking you're going to have somebody else to do it. But like, what kind of unraveled for you as you wrote your own book?
One, that is a hard work. Writing is hard, and I really respect people that write well, especially if you read some of the more difficult subjects. Uh, they not only do they write well, but they break it down so it's easily understood. And so I was trying to model that in a lot of ways. And one of the things she said to me uh, when she was reviewing the chapters, she goes, "You're chatting." And I go, "Excuse me?" She goes, "We call that chatting when you're just talking to someone." And so what I found that works for me, I wasn't really writing. I was just talking to people.
Hmm.
I simply just had a conversation, and it ended up, being words that went on paper. And it made it so much easier because uh, I like one-on-one discussions. I mean, I'm okay in a group, but I think you get more out of a one-on-one discussion. People open up and they talk to you, and so that's what I tried to do with the book is just have a discussion with someone. And um, my brother even, because I had a few people take a look at it. And one of the things he said was, "I like your style."
Hmm.
Okay, that's great. The more positive, the better. But I think um, it took me a little while to figure out that just having a conversation, putting that in words on paper, made it a lot easier for me. It worked for me anyhow.
Yeah, it was a very unique style. I really enjoyed it. It was very conversational and chatty. I love that she said that because that's exact. I did feel like I was having a conversation with you and you were telling me a story, and it was an engaging read, and it was an easy read, like you said, which makes it even more enjoyable. And I can see families sharing your book with each other and talking about the topics that you talk about and being inspired to learn more about horses and learning about horses for themselves through your words. I really thought it was unique, and I liked how you did it.
Thank you.
It was really thoughtful of you to send a copy my way too. I really enjoyed it. I have it here on my bookshelf, and I'll make sure to link to it in the show notes so people can go discover the book. And this is a very personal book that you wrote. It's a very personal journey of what you discovered through horse ownership in your life with horses, and insightful philosophical looks on how life could be a better place if we mimicked some of the behaviorisms of horses. So, in a nutshell, if you could leave readers with one message after they finish reading your book, what would you want that to be?
Well, sent that article when I sent the book. Do you have that?
I have it here. Would you like me to read it?
Yeah, I was thinking before the interview started,
Hmm.
uh, if maybe you could read a paragraph or two, or just read a certain amount, a certain section, then we can talk about it. And
Sure.
that's the message that I was trying to put out there. And Carly, before we leave the other topic, this book I think doesn't have to be a horse person. It was written for the horse person who would recognize certain things in it, but the non-horse person would learn about horses.
I
And
agree.
I've had feedback from both types of people, and they enjoyed it, but for different reasons,
Hmm.
And and by the way, the age range, I think I did okay with that, because the two testimonials on the back, one of them is an 80-year-old retired professor of philosophy. That's Dr. Rhonda. And
Hmm.
then the other one is a 13-year-old. So, so I think 13 to 80 took care of the age range pretty well. I was happy about that.
And that was smart of you to put testimonials or reviews from both age demographics to show this is sort of a book for everybody. I think that's really fantastic. And that was smart marketing.
Well, that was the publisher. That was someone. That was Sebastian. So I had I had some help. I got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, well, that's a great tip and a great takeaway for other authors. Just show the
Yeah,
range of your books by using, because you do say on the back of the book here, um, Dr. Rhonda Shervin, is that right?
Irvin. Yes, yeah,
Author of The Way of Love, The Path of Inner Transformation. So that's obviously an older person who's accomplished, right? And then you have Cecilia Anderson, teenage student at the Montessori Adolescent Program of St. Louis, Missouri, which is
yeah,
really great. It shows the range that this book
yeah.
appeals to, which is really smart marketing. Now, going back to the article that you included when you sent the book over to me, how about I just read the whole thing and you can comment on this, because I found this really interesting, and again, share with listeners, this, you wrote this for a
It
publication, a
was
newspaper.
well, yeah. It was letters to the editor. A lot of newspapers take in letters written by anyone in the neighborhood. Or, I mean, that they serve. And I did that years ago, and they got published. I, this one, I was thinking about it. The book has actually caused me to think more about what I was writing.
Hmm.
It's amazing. I don't know, maybe other authors do this too, that after you finish, you start to think more about it,
Hmm.
and you can go deeper into your own book.
Hmm.
And one of the things Sebastian, again, the publisher, said was some people, as soon as the book is published, all their friends and relatives and everybody start to, oh, you should have said this, you should have done that. And he goes, um, one fellow that he published, he wanted a new edition in 2 weeks. And he goes, no, we don't do that. He goes, at least a year, and then we'll start to talk about it. He goes, but be prepared for people to talk to you about, what you left out or what you should have done different. And so uh, this article that I wrote was actually just an extension of some of the things that I had already started to think about, but it was more adapted to what was going on then. Things happen, change quickly, and I'm going, okay, let me just put an article together. It had to be 200 words or less, so it kept it short. So go ahead and read it, Carly, and we
Yeah.
can.
And I'm glad you clarified that too, because it was interesting when I did read this article. I thought to myself, wait, he didn't really cover that stuff in the book. But I love hearing that this is a continuation in what you're thinking of next. And what's really neat about this is it doesn't necessarily have to be go back and revise the first book.
Right.
This is like a second book in the making right here.
Well, it could be. It could be. I'm finding I'm wandering into deeper and deeper water because there's so many, in quotes, experts out there.
Mm.
I'm not an expert at anything. I'm just an observer. But, I guess maybe something will be the trigger to do a second book. So,
Yeah. So let me dive into this article that you sent over, and I'd love to hear your commentary.
okay.
So it says, last fall, the book Nonsense to HorseSense was published about lessons learned after bringing horses into my life. I believe these natural law insights, if modeled, would make us better people. The book touches upon justice, that elusive, intangible, every society desires. Today, justice is laws and courts, the means used when higher values have been abandoned. It is man made and only a substitute for the real thing. True justice is as organic as our own will to survive and comes about when the truth of survival is understood and lived. To put things in perspective, a functioning community with 10 laws is stronger and more just than if it needed 100 laws. If in time 1,000 laws are needed, then that community has deteriorated to a point of collapse. What happened? How did we get here? Well, bad paths lead to bad places. A society that invents truths is inferior to a society that seeks truth. Invented truth is the path on which 10 becomes 1,000. For justice, we must put aside egos in politics. Justice follows living basic survival truths we were designed to live. Horses got it right eons ago. Why can't we? So talk to us a little bit about about that and your thoughts on justice and the laws of society. I'm
Okay.
curious to get your perspective.
Okay. One of the things that, uh, well, I said earlier was I didn't want to give away too much book, but I will talk about two chapters. And the chapter on two questions. One was, is there nonsense in your life? And is there nonsense in the world? Two
Mm.
questions. And I've asked those two questions at horse shows, when I do the author signings, and without exception, everybody has says yes, and they're saying yes to both questions, in my life and in the world. So we didn't go into detail as to what the nonsense was, but everybody thinks that way.
Mm-hmm.
So another chapter in the book, it's probably the shortest, I think it is the shortest chapter, and it's the definition of nonsense. And this was something that came about, and it's an impact definition. It's not like you would see in the dictionary. It's what impact does it have? So the definition of nonsense for this book is that which diminishes harmony. And because here's the thing, the two don't coexist. If you have more of one, you have less of the other. And so this article really starts to try to look at that if we're getting more and more nonsense, we're losing the harmony in our community. And when you lose harmony, one of the things, and we're just treating it's a band-aid approach, we're just treating the symptoms, is we pass laws, because people do bad things, and the way you stop bad things is you pass laws. Well, if you keep passing more and more laws, that should tell you that we're treating the symptoms. We're not getting to the root of the problem.
Mm.
And so that's why I'm saying 10 laws, a community with 10 laws is stronger and more just than one that needs 100 laws. And if in time you need 1,000, you're just right at the point of collapse. I mean, that's just, a simple way to put it based on what I'm thinking from, again, thinking about what we do versus the horses. And that's the point I was trying to make with the horses, is they're prey animals. They've been around for millions of years, and they still do things the way their ancestors did. And so that's why I think we could take a lesson from them. And then once I started to watch herd dynamics and pull lessons away from it, I'm going, well, okay, there's what we're doing wrong. They live to survive. They have to live a certain way. And if they don't, they're doomed. For example, if the lion makes a mistake, he misses a meal. But if the zebra makes a mistake, he is the meal. Mm. So horses as prey animals have had to do it right. And we, on the other hand, I think through technology and a lot of other things, we just have, I think, kind of made a mess of things. And we need to look at something, a model that has worked. And that's the message I was trying to promote with the book, like I said, whether you're a teenager or way beyond. And the article was just a little more in depth. I don't think a teenager would really understand it as much as an adult. But, is that the message? Did you get that from reading it?
Oh, well, yes. I mean, a lot of what you talk a lot about ego and self-absorption and, thinking about the self, like you're being the most important all the time rather than the community mentality. Yeah, self-centered. And that really, that is a very interesting parallel when you think about, humans and herd animals and where harmony is out of balance. When you're always thinking about yourself, you're not thinking about the betterment of community. Whereas in the herd, it's not the self, it's the whole, right? And there is established power within the
Exactly.
herd, but the whole herd works together to create harmony and survival and safety because
That's
they're
it.
all working together. Yes, they have, one that they've, said selected as the leader because that's the one that's
Right.
going to keep them safe. But they all work together, and they all have a certain level of power and they work in harmony, right? Like I really got that. And I really see how that philosophy is very different than where humans are heading, right? It's
Right.
very self-absorbed and
Right.
egotistical, and yeah,
Yeah.
so that definitely resonated with me for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's other things like the rules that or the axioms that evolved at the barn. Okay,
Hmm.
an axiom is a self-evident truth, and the one I liked, and I used it in the book. I mentioned it, referred to it, is the second one about I'm responsible. Doesn't matter at my barn. It doesn't matter what happens. I'm responsible, even if I'm not there.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm the herd leader.
Hmm.
It's actually a herd of five, and I'm the herd leader.
Hmm.
So I take full responsibility. And I have got to tell you, that works well in any part of life, okay? Not just at the barn, but man up, just, okay, and deal with it. And that way you're not making excuses.
Hmm.
You're not wasting time, arguing and things like that. You're you're solving the problem. So,
Yeah, and I love that analogy too. Like I am responsible no matter what because I'm the herd leader, and it's really interesting. I don't want to give away parts of the book, but for example, like if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time around horses and you get kicked, you can blame the horse, or you can say, "What in my behavior makes me responsible for what happened?" And that could
exactly.
be I'm not paying attention, or I knew I shouldn't put myself in this position and
Right.
I ended up getting kicked, or I ignored the signs that there was upset with the horse and I was in the way. I own responsibility for that. It's not the stupid horse, it's
Right.
me, right?
Exactly, exactly. I'm in the stall with these horses all the time. I feel very comfortable. They know
Mhm.
me, I know them. However, if anything ever happens where I get, pounded between a horse and the wall, that's my fault,
Mhm.
because a horse can spook at any time. We all know that.
Mhm.
And I gave some examples in the book about getting clobbered and learning from it. And
Mhm.
once again, my horses are my best friends. And even when I go down and take out hay out into the paddock, I know that I'm a magnet with the hay. Now I do know the pecking order, and so which horse is going to approach. But on rare occasion, two of them will come from a different direction that I don't necessarily see or hear,
Mhm.
and you'll see a spin and a kick. Okay, now whose fault is that? That's my fault because I'm going out there with that's bringing them together, and it's just a little tussle that happens when you first bring the hay out. I spread it out, and once they all find their little spot, then everything's good again. But
Yeah, and well, and I also like that because I think we share this with like horses make us better people because we have to think about something other than ourselves.
that's
Like
it.
the horse always comes first, and how are they behaving? That comes first because that's going to, cause a situation. Like as a horse owner, not only do they bring you peace, not only do they become your best friends, but they make you more aware and also
Yes,
like more responsible because you're thinking of others rather than yourself. And this has become our society has become a very me society
right.
rather than thinking about other things. That's why I think horses and horse ownership is so special because it sort of breaks that me sort of
Right, right.
culture.
Well, exactly, and it's pretty much it's a one-man show here because my wife is not into the horses, so anytime it doesn't matter what the weather is, it's a 7 day a week job,
Hmm.
but I know that, and I
Hmm.
talk about going down at midnight uh, in the
I love
winter.
that part. I love that part. Let's not spoil it. That's such a beautiful part. But yeah, you do a lot of sharing of your observations and the complete peace that you experience taking
Yeah.
care of your herd. And yeah, we'll say that for when they read the book because I really love that part. But
Okay. Okay. Let me ask you another. Pardon?
I said it was a beautiful snowy night and he was all bundled up, not wanting to go outside into the cold, but you went anyway and you had this miraculous experience, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, and that happens still. Every time. All you have to do is look for it. Once you tune into it, it's just a
Mhm,
matter. And the hard part is getting up out of that chair. It's tough, but it's well worth the effort for sure.
mhm.
And let me just ask you a question. And did you like the chapter on barn? We
On
won't barn.
Oh, barn. Yes, I did. I did like the chapter on barn. There's also other animals that do come along inside the book that join your herd, and I did like that chapter very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, he's still with us. He's still with us. So
That,
we won't talk about it anymore. But
that's great. Well, maybe you should give listeners just a hint of who Barn is.
but barn is short for Barney, and who's our barn cat.
Mhm,
And I have to tell you, barn cats are invaluable.
mhm,
Uh, we're especially where we were, mice were just everywhere,
mhm.
and he made it all the difference in the world. So, but anyhow, that's just who Barn is, and they can read more about what else he did for us. So,
Yeah, and he also became a part of your herd and your family and your community, right?
oh,
So
absolutely, yeah,
that's
yeah.
really
Well,
cool.
not only that, but you start to see the connections between everything.
All the
You know,
things, yes.
yeah,
It's like everything
yes,
takes care of itself. It's like an ecosystem
exactly,
that I think we sometimes forget to overlook because we're not paying attention to Mother Nature and how
right,
systems work. And like
right,
you really talk about, and that's just a little component of horses in the world. There's all these things work together in order to create the harmony that you talk about.
right, 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 exactly. And once again, if you don't have the harmony, nonsense shows up,
Mm,
and it's so important to be vigilant. I think we all need to be vigilant, and parents should teach it to their kids, and so that way it's something that uh, we all benefit from. You
mhm.
know.
Yeah, it's really cool. And I wanted to talk a little bit about a few of the writing responsibilities. Like, so this is your first book. So was this it's you've mentioned your publisher a few times. Can you tell us a little bit about your publisher, how you ended up working together? I mean, did you solicit to the publisher? Did they come to you? Like, how did that end up working out?
Actually, I think probably different than for most authors. I
Mm,
had a publisher before I had a book. And so when I went to Rhonda, Dr. Rhonda, about writing the book, she says, "No, you write it. I'll help." Well, she had access to this man, to his publishing company, because some of her books had been, through him. And she said he's always willing to help young authors
mm,
or new authors. And so when it became apparent that it was going to be me writing it, I contacted him, and he says, "Well, write me something." Okay, so I did, and it was just some thoughts. Just at this point, they were just random thoughts, not anywhere close to a coherent book or anything. So I submitted it, and he goes, "I said, what you think?" He goes, "Well, write me some more. Keep writing."
Well, I think what you're talking about is like a real testament to the beauty of relationships and also the power of authors uniting, right? Because what
Mhm.
what occurred for you is you had a relationship with Dr. Rhonda who had already published books and had a relationship with the publisher, and because of that
Yeah,
it opened a door and gave you an opportunity to make another connection with the publisher, and the publisher gave you a shot. So this is why I think authors uniting is so important, and I think why cultivating relationships within the industry with people who are doing things that you envy and maybe some things that are similar is really powerful, because they always say like nobody gets anywhere without having known someone, right? It's all about who
yeah,
know, that really, and then having talent is just, icing on the cake. But, a lot of the doors open because of relationships you've built and who you've been being in the world. Are you creating harmony or nonsense, right? People are going to be,
yeah, yeah,
people are going to be
yeah.
more willing to help you out if you've been great and supportive and interested. And, that's sort of how the world works, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's it. And I think her books are they're very philosophical. They get people thinking. They're deep books. Religious. She writes a lot of religious books, but
Mhm.
I think a publisher may look at, okay, what am I becoming a part of? Is it something that I can be happy and proud of, or is this something I'm going to have to make excuses for at some point?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's all part of it,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, well, good for you. I mean, that it just again, like what I love the most about this podcast is a lot of the authors I speak to and the journeys that they go on. It's like something magical pulls them forward to begin writing their books, but then also like the people that show up to help them put their book babies into
Yeah.
the world, and that's sort of the same thing that's happened to you. Now, let me ask you this: when you started out, like, what's something you wish you had known before you took on writing a book or stepping into this author career?
Well, it's I wish I had known more about the business in general, even though I had two very good companions to do all of that. Um, I found that it's the same as any industry because I did start a business on
Mhm.
my own business about 30 years ago, and by then I'd already had 17 years in working as an engineer, and so I had some good business experience. But when I went into another industry, no one had ever heard of me, no one had ever heard of my products, and you can't take what you know from one industry and just apply it to another. Some of the general principles, yes, you have to be hardworking and honest and dedicated and things like that. But it's the little things that takes takes time to learn.
Mhm.
And that's where I think a lot of people have a problem. They just can't survive that gap between actually getting to a place where it can be, they can make a living at it, and so they fail. And the what I found about the book business is it's very competitive, and uh, I guess without knowing it, that didn't surprise me in some ways. But I just wish I had known a little bit more. I think it would have been maybe a little bit less frustrating in some ways because my problem right now is the promotion of it. I think it's just the industry in general, the publishing and the book. I wish I'd have known a little bit more about it. It probably would have been a little bit easier to know. Okay, you got to go to horse shows, which is fine. I love horse shows. I've had really great discussions there and enjoyed the people. But like I said, it's not going to be an immediate overnight success
Mhm.
because you have to go through all those trials and the protocol to really, if people like it, then yeah, maybe it'll catch on and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a really interesting point that a lot of authors actually I've spoken to on this show have thought, okay, I once I write the book, it's just going to go out there and it's going to do great and it's going to sell itself. Well, that it's like that is really actually not the case. Like there is
Right.
a whole because I don't know. I think there's like I don't know the number for sure, but like a million books are being published every day. So there's like a sea of books in the world, and
Yeah.
if nobody's heard of your book, they're
Right.
not gonna go out and buy it. There's like this whole engine that you have to create on the back end of having
Right.
written a book. And a lot of the publishers put the marketing onto the authors, so it's like it's your responsibility to talk about your book baby and get it out into the world. And Dave, you're doing something really great today. You're talking with me on this podcast, and I'm hoping that this podcast will put a bigger spotlight on people who are writing about horses in their books. So this is check, good step, and then, there's what I'm hearing is there's a lot to learn and educating yourself on maybe ways that you can promote yourself for free without having to hire someone on the outside or maybe get some coaching from someone like myself or someone else, in the industry that's doing it and doing it well
Yeah.
to help you build your butterfly net so you can scoop them up in different ways and not do it and have to spend a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
So if you could go back, what would you do to educate yourself, or where would you start? What would you do to educate yourself if you like right now?
You talking about the writing process or the selling
Well,
process?
you just said you wish you had known more about the publishing industry. So you can pick one because all of that kind of falls under it. Writing,
Yeah.
publishing, marketing, it all kind of
Yeah.
falls together. Like
Yeah.
where would you have gone to start?
Well, I saw one of your questions was going through a traditional publisher or independent
Hmm.
publishing. Um, since I had a publisher and I didn't really have to make a choice. But I think what I would really do going back is researching. Now, once again, if you have to do it yourself, being self-employed, not with the business that I've had for 30 years, but also the one that was about 5 years ago, people just don't realize that's an art in itself,
Hmm.
is to sell things and to get to get known. So if I had to do it over, I would probably research and I talk to people like yourself
Hmm.
and and learn and start to put the pros and cons together. Like I've met other authors at these horse shows at the signings, and a lot of them are independent
Hmm.
published. But this one lady told me, she says, I got 5,000 books in my basement. Okay. And so when she goes to horse shows, she has to, have a good outing because those 5,000 books don't move themselves.
So was she traditionally published or independently published? Because,
I'm taking she was independently published and she,
well, she was probably traditionally published because that's what happens to a lot of traditionally published authors with the bigger houses is they have
uh,
they print their books in humongous batches. That's the beauty of being on demand. Print your books to take to events and order them as one-offs, like a 25 book batch here, a 50 book batch here, even 10 books at a time.
mhm.
So a lot of times within our traditional publishing, you sign that contract and then they print the books in bulk and you have to sell through all those books before they do another. That's where you get the first run, the second run, the third editions
Okay,
run through
okay,
a couple times. So it's just interesting, and you're right, and that's why I started this podcast for this reason exactly. So you know I came really small with my target audience because I wanted it to speak to equestrians who are writing books, and this is an opportunity to hear from other authors on their journeys and discovering. And I think this is a theme, like really do your research before you commit one way or the other, and understand what you're getting yourself
right,
into, because there's also ownership of intellectual property. There's also who owns that. There's also rights to audiobooks and ebooks. There's also royalties. A lot of independent authors make more money than traditional published authors because the
yes.
royalty rates are higher. So there's a lot of stuff to educate yourself on. Because, and I always say to people, write the book first and then figure all this stuff out later, because none of it matters until you've written the book, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to have a manuscript that's worth taking the next step. Yeah,
Well, or just at least a first draft that you can keep improving upon. But unless you've got a book to sell and market and pitch to, traditional publisher or go the independent route, you don't have to worry about any of that stuff because you don't have anything yet.
right, right, right. Exactly, exactly.
So, as we're going through this conversation, we're starting to get towards the end, and I love to ask people these questions. What has been the hardest part for you about being an author of a book? And then on the flip side, what's the best part? And I read your answers to the questionnaire, but I think that there might be a little bit more to what you shared there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I figured you'd pick up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the hard part? My answer was the writing. Well, the of course it's the writing, but what I learned was I had all these random thoughts, and they weren't in any order. And so when I committed to doing this, I had to reorganize things. And then one of the things Dr. Rhonda said to me at one point as I started to write the second half chapters, she goes, sounds like it's a little redundant. I'm hearing the same thing over and over. And she goes, but maybe I'm too close to it now. So maybe somebody else should kind of take a look. And but I knew deep down that she was right. Now here's what I found to be the hard part. Once you've written something, is to get rid of it, to clean house, because you're going, I've got all this time and work into it, and yeah, it sounds okay on its own, but when it connects to the other chapters, it is redundant. And that went against my thoughts about how the book should be designed. Short chapters, easy read. But if you're reading the same thing over and over again, just adding pages, not really any content.
Hmm.
So I had to go through and do some house cleaning, and that was it. So if I ever wrote a second book, what I would do is do the outline. As an engineer, you have to plan, and I was good at that. But it was a bit of a mess in the beginning, and then once I got through that, I'd be much smarter the second time. And what do I enjoy the most? What's written. I have got to tell you, I'm sure any author, once they've gotten through that draft and they can't make it any better, it actually sounds good to them. You go, yes, yes, you go and celebrate. And so what is written is really the best part. So
Yeah.
that's really the answers that I gave.
Yeah, and it's great. You added a little more context to those answers, and there's nothing like that feeling of holding your book that you've worked on and slaved on for so long. Put your heart into in your hands. There's nothing like that feeling. And I wanted to go back to like the writing part that you're talking about. What you were sharing about is you did something really important, which was to get other people's eyes on your writing, to give you, sometimes it's hard to like get that sort of feedback, but that's a very important step on getting across the line. That and editing, right? You worked with a
Yeah,
traditional publisher, so I'm sure they provided you with the editing process, but
right, right.
having those at beta readers or advanced readers and just getting their insights, before it's towards completion is really important, because they can see things. When you spend a lot of time working on something and writing on something, sometimes you just stop seeing it because you're so close to it. There's like repetition of words, or there's something might not fit, and that's why you really need the perspective of other people. So it sounds like you did a really smart thing, which was getting other people's eyes on it early on.
Yeah, and that is so important. Even I've heard NFL players say that the coaches, some players are coachable and some players are not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they know everything, and you can't coach them even though they've got bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
And but I had learned that lesson. I think being older, I'd learned that lesson a long time ago. You want people that are smarter than you to look
Mm-hmm.
at your work and take them seriously. Okay, my brother, for example, a couple of quick ones. My brother says, "Oh, I didn't like the way you said something about our early childhood." I go, "Well, what's the problem? He's my brother. So what's going on here? What's got you going?" And he mentioned it. I said, "Okay, I get your point." I said, "I'll reword it." It was the same message, but just worded in a different way. And he also picked up on something else. But these are the things you want. And even Marianne picked up on a phrase, and she goes, "Oh no, no, that wasn't it at all." I said, "Okay, let me reword it. I hear you, but that made the book better
Mm-hmm.
because it makes you better, so you're more aware of it and you don't stumble into that so much."
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
I really like what you said about being coachable. That is very important. And having someone smarter than you in your corner to help you make your work better. Like that is a really important life lesson, is to be coachable. Like when people have feedback, you don't always have to accept it either, but you should at least
right,
listen to what people have to say, consider it, and then you can choose to do something
right,
with that or not. The choice is up to you, but that's part of being coachable, is just being able to hear what someone is sharing with you
right.
and really think it through and decide whether you're going to act on it or not. So I think
Exactly.
that's a really important message that you just shared
Yeah,
there.
yeah. But you should get a lot of input and
Mm-hmm.
then find out what makes sense for you. And then
Right.
as you get more into it, then you've got this figured out to some degree. It's still good to hear from people, but you're not going to make the same rookie mistakes that you made early on that everybody was telling you about.
Right, which goes back to educating yourself and being responsible for educating yourself before you
Exactly.
take on any endeavor. Get the information, talk to other people, build your network, create
Right. Right.
relationship, and people will help you grow. And that's
Yeah.
what this is all about. Authors uniting. Like, look at all the wealth of information that you've shared with other authors here on the show today, or aspiring authors, and with me. I learned a lot from your book, and it was really great.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I really do. It means a lot.
Well,
So,
thank you for sending me a copy. I really, really appreciate your generosity. So Dave, we're getting towards the end of our interview here. I would love it if you would tell readers where they can find more information about you and your book.
well, my book. Let's go about my book. Actually, that's one of my weak points. I don't really. I'm not on social media. I've never really needed it up to this point. I go back to the good old days before all the technology, and so I guess that's something that's not helping me because I don't have this, all the social media to get the word out. But it is the book is on Amazon, so if you go there and either put in the title or the PD Basconi, either one, it'll come up, and it's on the publisher's website. However, it's just going to swing you back over to Amazon. So
Okay.
if anyone that's interested in the book, just go to Amazon. You can buy the ebook at Barnes and Noble. Of course, you can get the ebook on Amazon as well. So
Great. And I will link to your book in the show notes so people can find them. And Dave, I would say it's okay, right? That you're not utilizing social media. You're not the only one. It is a resource and a free tool that you can use. And there are a lot of us out here that can help you out and give you a little coaching. And I'm happy to talk to you offline as well. But do check out this podcast. There's a lot of valuable information. If you're interested in figuring out how to market and promote your books from other authors, I mean, I'm learning things that I had not heard of. In particular, there is an episode, I think it's episode 5. It's Ann Hunter. She's written the North Oak series books, and she goes into all of this excellent book marketing that actually works. And, she has a wealth of information. So I would highly recommend checking out that episode. And I continually add. So, when you talk about educating yourself, this is a great place to start. And you're marketing yourself because you're here on the show talking with me. And that's a really good start too.
Yeah. And I will say, I did look at a lot of those other podcasts just to get a feel for how this was going to go. They're excellent. They're excellent because you're right. Everybody brings in their own experience and their own experience. And you just pick up little things from people. That's all you need. And that's how at the end of the year, you're so much smarter. It's these little tidbits along the way. And then it allows you to take the next step. And when you look back over 2 or 3 years, you can't believe sometimes how much you've grown. But it was really day by day,
That's exactly right. And thank you for listening to the shows. I really appreciate that. And I'm glad they're adding value to your author life. And Dave, I've so enjoyed having you on the show today. Thank you for the gift of your time. And let's have you back on the show and you write that book too.
Sounds good. That's a deal. Carly, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and all that you've done.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. I hope you enjoy these Q&A sessions with wonderful equine authors who love all things horses and riding, just like me. Visit my website, carlycadecreative.com, where you can read the show notes, and make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you so much for your support. Want a free guide to secrets of horsebook authors? Gallop over to carlycadecreative.com/wisdom to have author advice delivered instantly to your inbox. If you are an author who writes about horses and would like to be spotlighted, please let me know. Visit my contact page at carlycadecreative.com to fill out a request. I'd be happy to have you on the show too. Thank you for tuning in to the Equestrian Author Spotlight podcast. See you next time. I'm your host, Carly Kade. Creative writing makes my spurs jingle.